Alexander Reeves did not remember when he stopped running and started stumbling, only that the cold October air sliced through his lungs as if it wanted to carve him open from the inside. Central Park was nearly empty at this hour, a vast stretch of wet leaves and dim lamps stretching between silhouettes of trees swaying in a restless wind. His polished shoes slapped against the pavement in uneven rhythms, one almost dragging behind the other because every muscle in his body felt on fire. His white dress shirt was torn at the shoulder, streaked with dirt and a faint smear of blood from when he had tripped over a broken branch minutes earlier. His breath came out in short, painful bursts, each one trembling with the rising tide of panic that refused to loosen its grip. He kept glancing back over his shoulder, convinced he saw movement behind him, a shadow slipping between trees, a shape too purposeful to belong to a wandering pedestrian. His vision blurred and refocused like a camera lens fighting to keep up with him. A faint mechanical hum drifted overhead, growing louder until the unmistakable glow of a small surveillance drone floated above the tree line. Its red light blinked in slow, steady pulses that made his heart pound even harder. His mind screamed danger, though his ears could not pick up any footsteps. The memories he tried so hard to suppress clawed their way back, flashing behind his eyes. The explosion, the heat, the ringing in his skull, the blurred shape of someone walking away while he lay on the floor, unable to breathe. The certainty that he had been marked for death. It slammed into him again with full force, making his legs give out. He fell hard onto the damp ground, palms scraping against gravel. A whimper escaped him before he could stop it. He rolled onto his side and forced himself to crawl, dragging his body toward a patch of bushes as if they could shield him. His chest tightened, his throat locked. The world tilted sideways. A figure appeared between the trees ahead of him, tall, dark, moving fast. Alexander froze. His breath lodged in his lungs like a stone. He tried to push himself backward, but his arms shook violently under him. When the figure stepped closer, his entire body curled inward like a wounded animal bracing for a blow. His voice cracked open in raw fear. "Please, do not hurt me." His words barely rose above a whisper. The figure stopped. For a moment there was only the sound of wind rustling through leaves. Then the person stepped into the dim circle of a street lamp, and Alexander realized he had been wrong. It was not a pursuer, it was a woman. A young woman in dark scrubs, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, a jacket hanging loosely over her shoulders. Her hands were still stained faintly with the reddish tint of dried medical work. Her eyes widened when she took in his bruised face and shaking body, but there was no fear in them. Only a startled concern that made something inside him twist painfully. She approached slowly, each step careful as if she were approaching a frightened patient in a trauma room. When she reached him, she lowered herself to her knees without hesitation, her movements steady and gentle. She kept her hands where he could see them, one palm open and facing upward, offering safety rather than threat. He tried to shrink back, but his body refused to respond. She spoke in a soft, even voice. "You are safe. I am right here." The drone buzzed again overhead. Alexander flinched violently and, without thinking, reached for her, gripping her sleeve and pulling her closer as if she were the only shield between him and the world. She steadied herself instinctively, one hand bracing against the ground, the other hovering near his shoulder, but still not touching him. He was trembling all over. His breath hitched in ragged gasps. She finally brought her hand to his cheek, warm and steady against his cold skin, guiding his gaze upward until his eyes met hers. "Focus on me. Keep breathing. I will not leave." Her voice wrapped around him like a lifeline. Somewhere nearby, a radio crackled a clipped male voice requesting coordinates. The sound sent a jolt through him. She heard it too, and he saw the sharp shift in her eyes as she understood this was not a drunk man or a lost businessman. Something dangerous and deliberate was happening. He clutched her wrist with desperate strength. "No hospitals, no police. Please." Something in the plea broke her hesitation. She nodded, once firm and calm. "Come with me." She slipped her arm under his and helped him rise, though his legs nearly buckled beneath him. As she guided him out of the park, her body close enough to keep him standing, His breath gradually slowed the longer he let her lead. For the first time in days, he felt the faintest sense of safety, fragile as a yellow match flame, but real enough to keep him moving. They disappeared into the shadows of the city as the drone drifted behind them, searching for a man who no longer walked alone. That morning had begun like every other day in the empire Alexander Reeves had built, except for the way his hands trembled when he buttoned his shirt collar and the way his reflection in the penthouse mirror looked back at him with eyes that did not feel like his own. The skyline of Manhattan stretched behind him, sharp and glittering, but he felt disconnected from it as if he were staring at a photograph rather than the city he once commanded with absolute certainty. His assistant had rushed him into a waiting car that took him straight to a secure federal building in Lower Manhattan where a high-level briefing was scheduled between his company and senior officials from Washington. They called him the man the world feared because the algorithms he created could predict acts of violence before they happened, detect patterns terrorists hid inside encrypted channels, and identify political threats in ways the government had never managed. He had once taken pride in that power. Today, he dreaded it. When he entered the conference room, rows of officials in dark suits turned their heads, some with respect, others with suspicion thinly veiled behind neutral expressions. A screen displayed the agenda of the emergency session. The explosion 2 weeks earlier had shaken national confidence, and whispers had begun to circulate through the intelligence world that the golden boy of American tech was unraveling. Alexander sat at the head of the long table and tried to steady his breathing. Liam Crow, his COO, sat 2 seats away, impeccably dressed and wearing an expression of practiced empathy. Alexander knew that expression too well. He had once trusted this man with everything. The meeting began. A Pentagon liaison addressed the room, stating bluntly that internal sabotage was suspected in the explosion that targeted Alexander during a tech summit in Chicago. Eyes turned toward him for confirmation. Alexander opened his folder and revealed encrypted logs his system had flagged days before the explosion, pointing to unauthorized access that originated from inside his own company. He spoke clearly, but each word felt like he was pulling it through thick mud. He told the room he believed someone on his leadership team had rerouted proprietary data and intentionally weakened event security protocols. Murmurs filled the room. Crow shifted in his seat and leaned forward, his tone smooth and rehearsed as he questioned these claims. He suggested that Alexander was still not fully recovered from the trauma of the blast and should not be making accusations without concrete proof. A few officials glanced at one another, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. They all knew the media coverage. Billionaire suffers breakdown. CEO unstable after trauma. Investors question leadership. Alexander clenched his jaw as Liam continued adding gentle but poisonous comments about Alexander's recent behavior, noting that he had been distant, erratic, unwilling to sleep, and overly reactive to harmless stimuli. It was all true, but it was also a calculated trap. If he defended himself too strongly, it would appear emotional. If he stayed silent, it would appear incriminating. One official asked him directly whether he believed he was fit to continue leading a company with national security influence. His heart thudded painfully. Before the explosion, no one would have dared question him. Now his competence was being debated as if he were not in the room. He forced his voice to remain steady. He explained that trauma did not erase logic and that his intuition about internal sabotage was based on verifiable digital footprints. He requested full cooperation from Homeland Security to investigate. Crow immediately countered by suggesting that Alexander's interpretation of the evidence might be influenced by his condition. The word condition hung in the air like a gavel. Something inside Alexander cracked then, not loudly, not visibly, but silently, in the way a foundation begins to split beneath a skyscraper. He stared at the table and tried to breathe. His chest tightened. The voices around him blurred. The fluorescent lights buzzed too loudly. Someone offered him water. Someone else whispered to Crow to let him rest, as if he were fragile glass, as if he were not the mind that had safeguarded half the nation's intelligence network. He excused himself quietly and walked out of the room before anyone could stop him. In the hallway, he pressed a hand to the wall, willing himself not to collapse. He made it into a restroom, locked the door, and splashed water on his face repeatedly. His reflection wavered in the mirror. His pupils looked too wide. His skin looked too pale. And then something happened that frightened him more than anything in that meeting. He stared directly at his own face and felt nothing. It was as if the person looking back at him was a stranger wearing his features. He whispered to the mirror, almost pleading, "Get it together. You know what you saw. You know who did this." But the panic built instead of fading. The walls felt too close, the air too thin. Outside in the hallway, he heard the distant echo of the building's security scanners and a burst of voices discussing the explosion again. The sound triggered the memory he could not outrun. The flash of light, the searing pain, the ringing that drowned out everything, the glimpse of a silhouette emerging from the smoke. A voice he recognized, but could not place. Fear surged like a wave. He stumbled out of the building and into the street, ignoring the calls of his assistant. Taxis honked. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. The sensory overload pressed down on him until all he could think of was escape. He started walking, then jogging, then running full force as if the city itself were chasing him. He did not know where he was going until he found himself crossing into Central Park. He kept running until the world tilted and his legs failed him. Hours later, he would remember flashes of the descent, the sound of leaves underfoot, the cold seeping into his clothes, the certainty that someone was behind him, someone who wanted him gone, and then a pair of gentle hands pulling him back from the edge. But in that moment, all he could see in the mirror was a man who no longer recognized the world he once controlled. Maya Hart pushed her apartment door open with her shoulder while keeping one steady arm wrapped around the trembling man leaning into her. The hallway lights flickered as they stepped inside, the faint scent of peppermint tea and laundry detergent filling the small space. Her apartment was modest, a second-floor walk-up in an old Brooklyn building, the kind where radiators hissed in winter and floorboards creaked with personality. Warm, yellow lamps cast a soft glow over the living room, illuminating a worn, brown couch stacks of medical textbooks and a tiny kitchen whose counters were cluttered with meal prep containers from her week of night shifts. Alexander sagged against the nearest wall, sliding down until he sat on the hardwood floor with his knees drawn up. His hands shook uncontrollably. His breathing was too fast, too shallow. Maya locked the door behind them and placed her keys on a hook beside the light switch. Her voice stayed calm even as she took in the bruised cut under his jaw and the panic still trapped in his eyes. "Stay with me. You are safe here." She knelt in front of him, carefully unbuttoning the top of his torn dress shirt so he could breathe more freely. His shoulder muscles twitched under her fingertips. He looked around the apartment as if expecting threats in every corner. His gaze flicked to the windows. She noticed. Without making a scene, she crossed the room and drew the curtains closed, shutting out the city and any eyes that might be searching for him. When she returned, she held a steaming mug of ginger tea she had prepared in seconds, muscle memory from years of soothing patience in shock. She crouched in front of him again. "Drink slowly. It will help." He stared at the cup like he could not remember how to hold it. She gently guided his fingers around the ceramic, her touch warm and grounding. He took a shaky sip, then coughed when the heat met his throat. She waited until he found his rhythm again. His gaze darted around the room once more before settling on her face. He looked like a man trying to piece the world back together by studying the only stable thing left in front of him. A key turned in the lock of the second bedroom. A moment later, Ethan, her younger brother, emerged wearing headphones around his neck and an oversized hoodie. He froze when he saw the stranger on their floor. His brows shot up. Maya whispered quickly, "Ethan, please, calm. This is someone who needs help." Ethan blinked, his confusion shifting rapidly into suspicion. He took a step closer. "Who is that?" "Did you drag home a patient again, Maya?" Then recognition crashed across his face. He leaned in, squinting. "Hold on. Is that actually him? The guy on the news? The billionaire who disappeared?" Alexander flinched like he had been struck. He pressed back against the wall. Maya shot her brother a warning look. Ethan, not now. Ethan raised his hands in surrender, then lowered his voice. Okay. Sorry. But Maya, if he is who I think he is, this is bad. Really bad. Maya ignored the panic in her brother's tone. She focused on the man shaking in front of her. His eyelids drooped heavily, exhaustion hitting him like a collapsing wave now that the adrenaline was fading. His grip on the tea loosened. The cup almost slipped, but Maya caught it at the last second and set it aside. Then she shifted closer and guided him until his head rested on her lap, her thighs forming a soft cradle. His eyes fluttered open in faint surprise as if the gentleness confused him. You are safe. Rest. He tried to protest, but the tremor in his voice made the words crumble. I should not be here. I am putting you in danger. She touched his forehead lightly, brushing damp strands of hair away. Then let me decide that. His breath shuddered as he closed his eyes. The tightness in his jaw loosened slowly. She felt the weight of his trust settle into her lap like something fragile and priceless. Within minutes, he fell asleep deeper than he had the strength to resist. Maya looked over at Ethan, who had retreated into the kitchen, whispering an urgent monologue under his breath. She mouthed, It is okay. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Maya, I know you want to fix the world, but someone is literally outside searching for this man. His face is everywhere. They said he might be unstable or dangerous. She glanced at the man sleeping on her lap. His breathing was uneven but calmer than before. His hands still twitched faintly, even in rest, as if part of him never fully let go of fear. Unstable, she murmured. Maybe. Dangerous. Only to himself right now. Ethan leaned on the counter, arms crossed. So, what is the plan? Maya stroked Alexander's temple gently, keeping her voice barely above a whisper. First he sleeps. Then I figure out the rest. Ethan huffed but did not argue. He walked to the windows and peered through the curtains. After a moment he muttered, We need to turn off our phones. All of them. If he is being tracked through digital signals, we cannot risk anything pinging our location. Maya nodded. Good thinking. Turn them off. Ethan did. She reached into Alexander's pocket for his phone, but he jerked in his sleep like the touch startled him. She soothed him with a quiet, It is okay, before carefully removing the device and switching it off. She placed it inside a metal mixing bowl to dampen any signal just in case. Hours passed quietly. The soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. The city outside buzzed faintly, but in this small apartment everything felt slowed, softened, wrapped in a fragile calm. Eventually, Alexander stirred, shifting slightly, his cheek pressing more firmly against her thigh as he drifted deeper into sleep. Maya's hand never left his hair. She did not understand why she felt so protective of a man she had known for less than an hour, but she sensed something in him, a fracture he had been carrying alone for too long, a wound deeper than bruises or panic. She could feel it in the way he curled inward when frightened, the way he looked at her like she was the last solid thing in a collapsing world. Ethan returned with a blanket which she draped over him. The billionaire everyone feared lay in the living room of a tiny Brooklyn apartment with his head resting on the lap of a night shift nurse who refused to treat him like a headline. Outside, the world searched for him. Inside, Maya refused to let him face it alone. Morning crept into the apartment slowly, as if it were afraid to disturb the fragile quiet that had settled overnight. Pale sunlight filtered through the curtains and stretched across the living room floor where Alexander Reeves lay wrapped in a blanket, his head resting near the edge of the couch now instead of Maya's lap. At some point during the night, Maya had carefully lowered him onto a pillow, though she had remained close, falling asleep in the armchair beside him, with her knees drawn up and her head tilted to the side in exhaustion. When Alexander's eyes blinked open, he stared at the ceiling for several seconds, disoriented by the unfamiliar shadows and the faint peppermint scent that clung to the air. His breath hitched until memory came rushing back in broken shards. The park, the drone, the panic, the woman with the steady hands. He sat up too quickly and winced as a wave of dizziness knocked into him. His fingers dug into the blanket as if anchoring himself to something that would not vanish. Then he saw her. Maya. Her hair had loosened from its bun, overnight strands falling across her cheek as she slept curled awkwardly in the chair, one arm hanging over the side. She looked peaceful in a way that made his chest tighten. He noticed something else too. She had draped her jacket over him at some point as an extra layer of warmth. A gesture so simple yet so disarming he felt it like a blow. Slowly, he swung his legs off the couch. His feet touched the floor. The wooden boards were cool beneath his skin. He moved cautiously like someone who did not trust the space around him yet. His gaze drifted back to her, without fully understanding why he reached out and adjusted the edge of the blanket that had slipped from her shoulder. His knuckles brushed against her sweater lightly. She stirred. Her eyelashes fluttered before her eyes opened in groggy confusion. She straightened suddenly when she fully registered the man standing inches away. "You are awake." She rubbed her eyes and sat forward. "How do you feel?" He tried to speak, but his throat felt tight. The words came out hoarse. "Better, I think." Maya gave a small, relieved exhale. The kind nurses give when a patient finally stabilizes after a long night. She stood and stretched her sore neck. "You slept straight through 5 hours. Your body must have been running on fumes." He looked away embarrassed by how completely he had collapsed the night before. "I should not have imposed like this. You did not. You needed help. Anyone would have done the same." He knew that was not true. Not in his world where weakness was a spectacle and compassion was a liability. His gaze shifted to the window. The curtains were still tightly closed. His heartbeat picked up. "Did anyone come by?" "Did you hear anything outside?" Maya shook her head. "Only the usual Brooklyn noise, a couple arguing, a car alarm. Nothing unusual." His shoulders eased a fraction. She noticed. "Sit. Let me check your vitals." Before he could protest, she gently guided him back onto the couch. She pressed the back of her hand to his forehead. No fever. She took his wrist and measured his pulse, counting silently. Her touch was light but firm, steadying. When she finished, she handed him a warm mug. This time, chamomile. Something softer. He held the mug with both hands, letting the warmth seep in. Maya settled onto the chair again, tucking one leg under herself. For a moment, they sat in silence. Not awkward, just quiet. Then the television in the kitchen caught Ethan's attention and he called out in disbelief. "Maya, you both need to see this." They followed his voice. The small screen flashed breaking news banners. A grainy surveillance shot of Alexander stepping into a black SUV from 2 weeks ago appeared beside his corporate headshot. The anchor spoke in urgent tones. "New developments continue in the disappearance of tech executive Alexander Reeves. Federal officials have not confirmed if foul play is suspected, but sources indicate growing concern regarding his mental stability following the Chicago blast. Additional commentary speculated about his role in security failures." Ethan muted the TV. "This is getting worse. They think you are either missing guilty or losing your mind." Alexander braced himself against the counter. The world he built was turning against him piece by piece. He swallowed hard. "I should go. Being here puts both of you at risk." Maya folded her arms, refusing to move. "Go where you cannot return to your company. You cannot walk into a police station, and based on last night, someone is absolutely looking for you." He met her eyes. They held steady, unwavering. "You saved me. I will not drag you deeper into this." She stepped closer, her voice low and steady. "You are not dragging me. I am choosing this." He blinked. The word choosing struck him with unexpected force. Maya glanced toward the living room. "You said someone inside your company is involved. Someone powerful. That means you cannot face this alone." He let out a tired, bitter laugh. "Alone is all I have known for years." She shook her head slowly, watching him like she could see straight through the armor he once wore. "That is the problem." Ethan grabbed his jacket. "Before we brainstorm, we need breakfast, and maybe a plan that does not involve hiding in our living room forever." Maya rolled her eyes affectionately, but nodded. The normalcy of their interaction grounded Alexander in a way he had forgotten was possible. When she turned to him again, her expression softened. "Sit. Drink your tea. Breathe." He obeyed before realizing he had. She sat on the edge of the coffee table facing him. She guided him through another breathing exercise. In for 4, hold for 2, out for 6. He followed her voice like a lifeline, and slowly the edges of panic receded. Their knees were almost touching. He felt the warmth of her presence. She looked at him with a gentleness that unsettled him more than any explosion. "You do not have to be the man the world fears. Right now," she whispered, "just be the man sitting here, with me." Something in his chest loosened painfully. He lowered his gaze, unable to hold hers for long. The world outside still hunted him. His enemies still moved in the shadows. But inside this modest Brooklyn apartment he felt something he had not felt in years. The faint beginning of safety. For the first time since the blast in Chicago, Alexander Reeves felt stillness, the kind that settled not in the room but somewhere deep under his ribs. Maya had stepped into the kitchen to prepare something simple for breakfast while Ethan scrolled through articles on his tablet, muttering under his breath about misinformation and clueless journalists. Alexander sat on the couch, gripping the edge of the blanket like a man afraid that if he let go, reality would collapse beneath him. He watched Maya move about the kitchen, quiet, efficient, grounded. She cracked eggs with one hand, stirred onions in a pan, wiped her hands on a towel tucked at her waist. There was a steadiness in her movements that soothed him more than he wanted to admit. She called out over her shoulder, "You okay in there?" His voice was soft, nearly swallowed by the room. "I do not know, but I am trying." She stepped into view, leaning lightly against the doorway. He looked up at her, and for a second everything inside him wavered like glass catching light. The simple domesticity of her presence contrasted so sharply with the chaos inside his mind that the tension snapped. He pressed a hand to his forehead. Maya crossed the room, instantly kneeling beside him. "Hey, eyeline." She lifted his chin gently with 2 fingers. "Breathe." He did. Slowly, awkwardly. But he did. And in that moment the words he had been swallowing for days rose unbidden. It was not an accident. Maya froze like the air around them had shifted. The explosion. It was not an accident. Her eyes softened but sharpened at the same time. "Tell me everything." He hesitated. The truth was landmine dangerous, but keeping it inside him felt like drowning. He rubbed the inside of his wrist where faint red marks still lingered from falling on the park pavement. 3 nights before the explosion, he said quietly, "Someone bypassed our encrypted channels. Someone with top-tier clearance. The only people with that kind of access are my senior officers or myself." Maya's brows drew together. "So, sabotage, yes. And when the blast happened, I remember seeing someone standing through the smoke. A silhouette. Watching. Not helping. Not shouting for aid. Just watching." A cold shiver crawled down Maya's spine. "Did you recognize them?" "Not clearly. But after the meeting yesterday, after Liam undermined me over and over, I heard his voice in my head, the same tone I remembered right after the blast, right before I blacked out." Maya went still. "You think Liam Crow was involved?" Alexander closed his eyes. "I know it sounds paranoid, but he has been pushing for months to take control of the security division. He wanted access to the defense algorithm keys, the ones I refused to hand over." Maya sat back on her heels, thinking. "And now he is using your trauma to discredit you." Alexander nodded, once a sharp, pained motion. "He claims I am unstable. He is framing me from the inside while hiding whatever he is doing behind closed systems." Her jaw tightened with quiet fury. "You are not unstable. You are traumatized." "Those are not the same thing." He swallowed hard. The room blurred a moment. His hand shook slightly, and she steadied it with both of hers. When her palms wrapped around his fingers, something in him cracked open. The confession slipped out quieter than a breath. "I do not remember the last time someone touched me gently." Maya blinked. The words landed in her chest like a bruise. She held his hand for a beat longer, letting silence speak what neither of them had names for yet. Ethan appeared in the doorway, pausing mid-stride when he saw their hands. He raised his brows, but said nothing. Instead, he set his tablet down on the coffee table. "You both need to see something." He tapped the screen. The article displayed an internal leak claiming Alexander had been mentally unfit for months before the blast. Anonymous sources within Reeves Security Intelligence suggested he suffered hallucinations and paranoia. Another article accused him of hiding financial irregularities. Alexander stared at the screen as if it were showing him his own execution notice. Ethan continued reading, and there is more. People online are speculating that you staged your disappearance to manipulate the market. Maya's anger flashed. This is coordinated. Someone is flooding the media with noise to drown out the truth. Alexander leaned back, his breath unsteady. "They are painting me as the villain before I can gather proof." Maya's voice softened. "That is why you cannot do this alone." He looked at her long enough for something unspoken to pass between them, something that frightened him more than any threat outside that apartment. Trust. Real trust. Ethan cleared his throat, shifting the mood slightly. "Maya, you need to see this too." He held up a printout he had been annotating. "I dug into the explosion logs. There is a missing 5-minute block where all external sensors were disabled." Maya frowned. "That cannot be accidental." Alexander shook his head. "Only someone with equal clearance to mine could override the sensors, which means Liam, or someone working for him." Ethan tapped the page. "Or someone framing both of you." Maya's hand tightened around Alexander's. Whether he noticed or not, his thumb brushed the side of her palm. A subtle electric moment passed between them, something fragile and growing. Maya's voice dropped to a whisper. "Alexander." "I believe you." He looked at her with an expression that felt painfully raw. "Why?" "You barely know me." She brushed a loose hair from her cheek. "Because you looked at me like someone who has been holding the world up alone and finally let it fall. Because truth does not tremble, but trauma does. And because nothing inside you last night felt like a lie." His breath caught, jerked, startled by the depth of her certainty. He lowered his gaze, but she caught his chin again, lifting it gently. "You do not have to keep breaking alone." He inhaled a slow, shivering breath. The city outside hummed, unaware of the quiet unraveling in this tiny apartment. For the first time in weeks, Alexander felt something uncoiling inside him. The first thread of connection pulling taut between two lives that had collided by accident, fate, or something dangerously close to both. The first sign came quietly, almost too quietly, like danger testing the edges of the air before stepping fully into the room. Maya had just finished cleaning the breakfast dishes when Ethan's voice cut through the apartment with an abrupt sharpness. "Maya, come here, now." She hurried to the window where Ethan stood frozen, one hand gripping the curtain, the other pointing down at the street. Parked directly across from their building was a black SUV, not unusual in New York, but this one had engine running lights on and two silhouettes in the front seats who had not moved for nearly 20 minutes. Ethan whispered, "They are watching the building." Alexander stiffened instantly. His breath stuttered. He stepped back from the window as if the glass might burn him. His pulse raced beneath his skin. "That is one of ours. Company fleet vehicle. I recognize the headlights pattern." Maya's stomach dropped. "So they already know he is alive." Ethan cursed under his breath. "How?" "We turned off everything. Phones, Wi-Fi." Maya pointed toward the small metallic bowl where they placed Alexander's phone. "What about your watch, or anything with Bluetooth?" Alexander checked his wrist, then exhaled sharply. "I smashed mine after the blast. I have nothing that can be tracked." Ethan paced the narrow space between the couch and the bookshelf. "Okay, so either someone saw you last night or they already suspected where you might run." Maya bit the inside of her cheek. Alexander's panic was rising fast. She could see it in the twitching of his jaw, the way his eyes darted to every exit. She touched his elbow, grounding him. "Look at me." Slowly, he did. His breathing steadied a fraction. "We will not panic until we know they are here for you. Just because a car is parked outside does not mean." The apartment buzzer rang. All three froze. The sound echoed through the small space like the strike of a match in a dark room. Ethan grabbed Maya's arm. "Do not open it. Do not move." Alexander whispered hoarsely, "No one knows I am here. Not officially." Maya stepped to the intercom, pressing the audio button with a hesitant hand. "Hello," a clipped male voice crackled through the speaker. "NYPD. Mom, we are checking on a missing person possibly in this building. May we come up?" Alexander's face drained of color. Maya remained perfectly still. Her heartbeat pounded against her ribs. She spoke carefully. "Do you have identification?" A pause. Then, "We are on official assignment, ma'am. We need access," Ethan muttered. "That is not how cops talk. He is lying." Maya released the button immediately. The buzzer rang again, longer this time, more insistent. Alexander backed into the living room, shaking his head. No. They are here for me." Maya's instincts kicked into full emergency mode. Doors, windows, exits, blind spots. Escape. She grabbed Alexander's jacket. Ethan grabbed the backpack with food and bottled water. Ethan nodded, dashing into the bedroom. Sirens sounded faintly in the distance. Not for them. But the sound made Alexander flinch like a wounded animal. Maya pressed a hand against his chest, lightly grounding him. "Stay with me. Eyes on me. In through your nose." Slowly. He tried desperately. His breath came uneven, but he followed her voice, tethered to it like a lifeline. The buzzer stopped. Silence. Then the creak of someone stepping into the building hallway. Maya's eyes widened. "They are coming up!" Without thinking, she grabbed his hand. "Come on." There was no time to think about the intimacy of the gesture. They hurried down the narrow hallway to the fire escape window. Ethan arrived with the backpack slung over his shoulder. "You are planning to go outside in broad daylight," he gestured wildly. "That SUV is still out there." Maya pushed the window up with a grunt. "We do not have a choice." They climbed out one at a time onto the rusty metal fire escape landing. The city below roared with its usual morning noise, but up here everything felt suspended. Alexander leaned heavily on the railing, gripping it like it might disappear if he blinked. His panic surged again at the height, the open air, the vulnerability. Maya cupped his face with both hands, blocking out the view of the street. Focus. Me. Not the fall. Not the noise. Just me. His breath hitched, then steadied slightly at her voice. Ethan locked the window behind them just as a heavy fist slammed into their apartment door from the inside hallway. "Police. Open the door." Except the voice carried an edge too sharp, too impatient, too threatening. Maya whispered, "Definitely not NYPD." They began moving down the fire escape steps as quickly and quietly as possible. Their shoes clanged softly on metal. On the second-floor landing, Maya paused, glancing across the alley. Opposite them was another building with an old maintenance store on the rooftop level. Ethan whispered, "That door looks loose. We could cross the railing, jump the small gap, and get in through the roof." Alexander looked at the gap barely 4 feet wide, but his vision tunneled. His knees weakened. Maya squeezed his hand. "Do you trust me?" The question was simple. Dangerous. Loaded. He nodded without thinking. She climbed onto the railing, first testing its stability. Then she reached one hand toward him. "Come." He hesitated only half a second before taking her hand, climbing up beside her. The gap looked wider now from this height, exaggerating itself in his panicked mind. Ethan was already crossing. Maya went next, landing lightly on the opposite railing. She extended both arms toward Alexander. "Jump to me." He stared at her. She seemed impossibly steady, bathed in the soft glow of reflected morning light. Her hair windswept, her eyes fierce and kind. The way she held out her hands, it felt less like a leap and more like a promise. He pushed off the railing. His landing was messy, stumbled, but Maya caught his arms, pulling him in before he fell. His chest pressed briefly against hers, breath mingling warm and shaky between them. Then Ethan pulled the maintenance door. It screeched, but opened. They slipped into the dark stairwell. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly outside on the fire escape. "They are following?" Maya whispered. Ethan bolted down the stairs. Maya kept pace, gripping Alexander's hand tightly as they descended 2 flights. They emerged into a dim storage hallway, then out a service door that led to a narrow alley behind a deli. Maya halted, peeking around the corner. The SUV was still watching the front, not the alley. She exhaled. Good. Now go left, blend into the crowd. They stepped onto the sidewalk, merging with commuters. The noise of the city swallowed them. Alexander felt Maya's fingers intertwined with his as though she were afraid he might shatter if she let go. Every sound still made him flinch. Every shadow felt like danger, but her grip kept him moving, kept him breathing, kept him from vanishing into fear. Someone is watching him. Someone is hunting him. But someone was also holding him, and that made all the difference. They did not stop moving until Maya was sure no one had followed them. By the time they reached the quiet residential block near Queens Boulevard, Alexander's breath had already begun to fray at the edges again. The constant noise of traffic, the rumble of subway tracks beneath the pavement, the sudden flare of a car horn, all of it pressed against his senses like invisible hands. Maya guided him into the basement entrance of her friend Janelle's townhouse, a place she often used to store extra medical gear and emergency supplies. It was nothing more than a converted laundry room with stone walls and shelves of cleaning products, but it was safe, quiet, dim, and isolated from the street. She locked the door behind them. Ethan dropped the backpack and leaned against a shelf, panting. If that was Crow's men, we are in way over our heads. Maya ignored him, her eyes locked on Alexander. He stood motionless near the wall, shoulders drawn tight, hands curled into trembling fists. His breath came too fast, too shallow. She recognized the shift instantly. The way his gaze darted around the room as if searching for exits, the way his chest rose too quickly, the way his fingers twitched like they were losing sensation. He whispered, barely audible, I cannot breathe." Maya stepped slowly toward him. "Alexander, look at me." His knees buckled slightly. He pressed a hand against the wall to steady himself. His eyes were unfocused, glassy, trapped in a place far away from this dim basement. The sound of the explosion replayed in his mind like a loop. The flash of fire, the ringing in his skull, the suffocating heat, the smoke, and the certainty of death, and then the silhouette. Watching, always watching. His breath cracked into a sharp gasp. He slid down the wall until he was almost crouched, arms wrapped around his head. Maya rushed forward and dropped to her knees beside him. "Alexander, listen to me. You are here. You are not there." But he didn't hear her. His world had collapsed inward. He was back on the floor of that convention hall, lungs, burning ears, bleeding, waiting for the final blow that never came. The panic swallowed him whole. Maya cupped his face with both hands, forcing his gaze toward her. His eyes were wild, unfocused, wet with a pain that had nothing to do with physical injury. "Alexander, my voice. Follow my voice." His breath hitched violently. His chest locked. His fingers clawed at the floor. She leaned closer, her forehead almost touching his. "Breathe with me. Now." Her voice was low, steady, textured with calm he could anchor to. In. She demonstrated. Slow, controlled. He tried. Failed. Tried again. Out. Again. With me. I am right here. Ethan hovered anxiously nearby, but Maya shot him a quick glance, telling him silently to stay back. This was not something he could step into. This was a wound deeper than anything stitches could close. A sound escaped Alexander, broken and small, the sound of a man who had carried too much for too long. Maya moved even closer, wrapping her arms around him. Not tight, not trapping. Just enough to remind him he was not alone in the darkness. His forehead pressed against her shoulder as another wave of panic tore through him. Maya kept her palm against the back of his neck, fingers lightly threading into his hair, grounding him with human warmth. "Listen to my heartbeat." He inhaled sharply, trembling. "Feel it. Count it. You are not dying. You are safe. With me." Slowly, painfully, his breathing began to sync with the rhythm of her chest rising and falling against him. His rigid muscles softened by degrees. His hands unclenched. The air returned to him in small, uneven pieces. He clung to her shirt as if it were the only real thing left in the world. Maya slid down further until she was sitting fully on the ground, pulling him gently with her so he could curl into her chest. She stroked the back of his head as steady as a metronome. "It is okay. You are okay. I am not leaving you." His voice cracked open, barely audible. "Do not leave me, please." Maya felt her throat tighten, but her voice remained steady. "I stay. I choose to stay." Those words landed inside him with a force he could not describe. Something fragile cracked open. Something long frozen began to thaw. He drew a shaking breath against her collarbone, the warmth of her anchoring him to the present moment brick by brick. In the dim basement, lit only by a weak bulb, the billionaire the world feared sat trembling in the arms of a night-shift nurse who refused to let him drown in memories. Time moved slowly. The panic ebbed little by little until Alexander's breathing stabilized into a heavy, exhausted rhythm. His forehead remained pressed to her shoulder. His fingers curled weakly into the fabric of her sleeve. Maya didn't move even when her legs began to ache from the weight. She held him steady and patient, letting silence fill the spaces words could never reach. Finally, he exhaled one long, shaky breath and whispered into her shoulder, "I am sorry." She shook her head. "Do not apologize for being human." He closed his eyes at that, his chest tightening with something painfully tender. No one had ever said those words to him. Not his board, not the press, not the men who wanted his algorithms, not even the friends who loved his power more than him. She pulled back slightly just to lift his face in her hands. His eyes were red, unfocused, vulnerable in a way she suspected he hated, but could not hide. "Look at me. Really look." He did. And the moment their eyes met, something inside him settled like a storm losing its roar. Her thumbs brushed lightly beneath his eyes, smoothing hair from his forehead in a gesture so gentle it hurt. "You are not broken," she whispered. "You are hurt. That is different." His throat tightened. He didn't know how to respond because the truth in her tone was almost unbearable. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air felt charged with something intimate and fragile. Then Ethan cleared his throat awkwardly from across the room. So, not to ruin this moment, but we probably should not stay here too long." Maya shot him a glare. He raised both hands defensively. "I am just saying, they might track us again." Maya helped Alexander sit upright, though she kept a hand on his shoulder until she felt him steady himself. He wiped a trembling hand over his face. "I am sorry you saw that." She answered gently. "I am not." He looked at her startled. "It means you finally let someone see you." The billionaire swallowed hard. Something in him shifted. Quiet, but real. A step toward something he had not known he needed. Healing. The basement lights buzzed faintly, the single bulb swaying overhead as if the air itself trembled from the aftermath of Alexander's panic attack. Maya stayed close to him as they regrouped, her hand lingering near his shoulder even after he steadied his breathing. She could feel the exhaustion radiating off him, the raw vulnerability still clinging to his expression, but beneath it was something sharper now. Determination. A man beginning to remember who he was even if the world had tried to bury him beneath fear. Ethan pulled up his tablet again, swiping through feeds. The news cycle was accelerating and not in their favor. Every headline spiraled with speculation. Missing billionaire. Mental instability. Corporate fraud. Potential national security threat. Maya felt her stomach turn. This was not random. Someone was orchestrating it. Alexander rubbed his temples, his voice low. "Liam is accelerating the narrative. He wants me discredited beyond recovery before I can expose him." Maya exchanged a glance with Ethan, both coming to the same realization. "This is character assassination on a national stage," Ethan muttered. "And the craziest part is people are eating it like candy." But the worst hit was still coming. The tablet buzzed with a new notification. Ethan clicked it. A video thumbnail filled the screen. Alexander sitting in a dim room, hands folded like a guilty man speaking into the camera. Maya's brows knit. What is that? Ethan hesitated, then pressed play. The video was designed to look like a confession. Alexander's digital likeness said in a deadened voice, "I admit my involvement in unauthorized arms transactions. I manipulated defense contracts for personal profit. I allowed the Chicago blast to occur to shift public narrative." Maya felt cold wash over her. That's not him. His voice, his face, the lighting, but the movements were off. Barely. Subtle, too subtle for the average viewer. Alexander stared horror flooding his features. That is a deepfake, an extremely advanced one. Ethan threw his hands up. They are framing you for treason. Maya clasped a hand over her mouth as the video continued, perfectly timed with fabricated financial records and doctored security footage. Every piece locked together like a puzzle engineered for destruction. Comments were already flooding in online. He is done. Traitor. Lock him up. It was everywhere in minutes. Shared, embedded, clipped, weaponized. Maya's heart hammered. Who even has the resources to do this? Alexander whispered, Liam. Or whoever Liam is working with. He swallowed hard. I never should have let him near the classified algorithm files. Maya rounded on him. This is not your fault. He shook his head. My security protocols were supposed to be airtight. If the wrong people gain access to our predictive AI models, they can destabilize entire geopolitical networks. Maya placed both hands on his shoulders, forcing him to meet her eyes. Alexander, stop blaming yourself for the actions of a man who planned this. You are not responsible for his betrayal. His breath trembled as he exhaled, his gaze softening just enough for her words to steady him. Ethan paced the room. Okay. Let us think. If they convince the world you are guilty, then the second you step outside, someone will turn you in. Or worse. Alexander leaned against the shelves, pressing his palm flat against the cold metal. Then I should never have come here. I am putting you both in danger. Maya stepped toward him again, her voice firm. We talked about this. You do not get to decide for us. You are not a burden. You are not danger. You are someone who needs help, and I choose to help you. He closed his eyes, letting the words anchor him again. Ethan clicked into a separate feed suddenly. Oh, you are not going to like this. A live press conference was underway. Liam Crow standing at a podium, suit perfect, voice grave. A grim performance. We are devastated by what has come to light. Alexander Reeves, once a trusted leader, betrayed this nation and the values we stand for. We are cooperating fully with federal authorities to locate him. Our deepest concern is the risk he poses to national security. Maya felt fury burn in her chest. He is disgusting. Alexander stared at the screen, jaw tight, eyes blazing. Liam is setting the board perfectly. By the time I get to Washington, no one will believe anything I say. Ethan frowned. Then why go at all? Why not run? Hide. Stay off the grid until you can gather proof. Alexander shook his head. If I run, I look guilty. And Liam keeps control of the algorithm he is trying to sell. No, I cannot let that happen. Maya watched the conflict tear through him, the instinct to flee the responsibility, to fight the fear of collapsing again. She stepped closer. What if you did not go alone? He looked at her, startled. Yaima. Washington is dangerous for you. Everything is dangerous at this point. She held his gaze. But you cannot clear your name if you are dead. You need someone who won't abandon you halfway. Someone who knows your tells. Someone who can ground you when your panic hits. Someone who actually sees you. His breath caught. She added quietly. Let me be that person. His voice dropped to a whisper. You cannot risk that. She stepped closer until they were inches apart. You asked me not to leave you. I meant it when I said I am staying." Something shifted in his chest. Something he had buried under years of power pressure, responsibility, and loneliness. Trust. Real trust. Ethan looked between them. "Okay. If you are both insane enough to go to Washington, then we need to plan this right. No electronics, no public transit, no credit cards. You need to move like ghosts." Maya nodded. "And we need evidence. Something to expose Liam before he can react." Alexander hesitated, then pulled a small encrypted drive from the lining of his jacket. "The only proof I have managed to salvage. Logs of unauthorized access. Firewall overrides. If we can get this to someone trustworthy in D.C., we might have a chance." Maya took the drive from his hand carefully, like it was fragile. Or like he was. Her voice softened. "Then we go. Together." For the first time since the explosion, Alexander felt the faintest flicker of hope. Dangerous hope, but still hope. And in Maya's steady gaze he found the courage to face the truth lurking behind everything. Liam Crow was not just trying to ruin him. He was willing to burn the country to do it, and someone had to stop him. Someone who was no longer alone. The train to Washington, D.C. rattled beneath them as it sped south, carrying the three of them toward a storm that had already swallowed the nation's attention whole. Maya kept her hand on Alexander's knee the entire ride, not gripping, not holding, just grounding him with presence. Her thumb brushed lightly back and forth every few minutes whenever she sensed the stiffening of his muscles, the way his breath shortened whenever the train horn blared or the metal wheels screeched along a curve. Ethan sat across from them, a hoodie pulled low and a duffel bag clutched between his feet. He kept his eyes fixed on the window, though his reflection showed a flicker of worry each time he glanced at his sister and the man leaning into her touch more than he realized. When they finally arrived in the capital, the city buzzed with tension. News vans lined the streets around the Capitol building. Barricades blocked traffic. Police officers stood watch at every crosswalk as if expecting chaos at any second. The hearings were about to begin. Alexander pulled the hood of his jacket up farther shoulders tight. Cameras were everywhere, lenses hungry as if trying to devour the story before he even stepped into the building. Maya leaned in close, her voice a whisper meant only for him. "You can do this. You are not alone." Ethan adjusted the straps on his bag. "We slip through the south entrance. Less media. More security, though." Maya nodded. "That is exactly what we want." They moved quickly through the cluster of reporters, keeping their heads down. A few journalists shouted his name, recognizing his silhouette even beneath the hood. Alexander flinched each time, but Maya's steady touch kept him focused. They cleared the final security checkpoint, and for a moment the noise of the city disappeared behind thick government walls. Inside, tension seeped from the marble floors and ornate columns. The hearing chamber buzzed with whispered conversations, the room filled with senators, advisors, intelligence officials, and analysts. Screens displayed headlines framing Alexander as a national threat. His face altered by deepfakes played in silent loops behind the committee seats, each frame twisting public opinion further against him. He froze in the doorway. Every head turned. Conversations stopped. Cameras pivoted. For a moment, he could not breathe. His chest tightened and the edges of his vision dimmed. Maya moved instantly, placing her hand at the center of his back. The warmth of her palm steadied him just enough to step forward. Ethan whispered, "They are already judging you," but Maya whispered back, "Then let them judge the truth." Alexander swallowed hard and walked toward the witness table. The senators murmured. Some faces reflected pity, others scorn. A few barely concealed triumph. Liam Crow sat in the row reserved for corporate leadership. His suit flawless, his posture immaculate, his expression carved into an image of solemn responsibility. But his eyes, cold and calculating. When Alexander's gaze met his, Liam lifted his brows ever so slightly in a silent taunt. "You are already defeated." Alexander looked away quickly and sat. Maya stood behind him, arms crossed, jaw set. Ethan stayed on her left, scanning the room for potential threats. The lead senator tapped the microphone. This hearing will now examine evidence regarding Mr. Alexander Reeves and the alleged breach of national security. Alexander clasped his hands together, forcing them not to shake, but the tremor betrayed him anyway. Maya's hand rested briefly on his shoulder. The senator continued. "Mr. Reeves, before we begin questioning, do you wish to make an opening statement?" He leaned toward the mic. His throat felt raw. "Yes." He inhaled sharply, then spoke. "2 weeks ago, I survived an explosion that nearly killed me. This was not an accident. My systems detected unauthorized access from inside my company. Someone with top-level clearance manipulated data to compromise national security." Murmurs rippled through the room. Liam maintained a stoic mask, but his fingers twitched once on the armrest. Alexander continued. "Since then, I have been hunted, framed. My image has been altered in a deep-fake video to force the public to believe I am a traitor." More murmurs. One senator raised a hand. "Mr. Reeves, are you stating you are suffering hallucinations following the trauma?" Alexander's pulse spiked. The question hit him like a blade. The world stirred, voices blurring. Liam leaned forward slightly, smirking. Maya stepped closer, her fingertips lightly brushing the back of his chair. It was enough. Alexander inhaled. "I am stating I have PTSD, not hallucinations, and trauma does not negate truth." A hush swept the room. He reached into his jacket and placed the encrypted drive on the table. "This contains logs proving unauthorized access, firewall overrides, failed attempts to replicate my signature. All without my knowledge." A senator asked sharply, "And who are you accusing?" Alexander lifted his gaze. His eyes burned. Liam Crow. Gasps erupted. Cameras clicked. Senators exchanged startled looks. Liam rose with practiced indignation. "This is absurd. I have dedicated my entire career to protecting this nation." Alexander met his eyes. "Then why did you disable the Chicago security sensors 5 minutes before the blast?" A collective inhale filled the chamber. Liam's composure cracked for a split second. Maya saw it. Ethan saw it. The senators saw it. The lead senator leaned forward. "Mr. Crow, can you respond to that?" Liam's jaw tightened. "I will not dignify baseless accusations." But there was movement behind the chamber. Jenna Park, investigative journalist, entered with urgency, whispering to staffers and handing them a tablet. The senator received the device, glanced at the screen, and froze. It showed video files, real ones, not doctored. Liam exchanging encrypted messages with an unidentified organization. Liam pacing while discussing selling the predictive algorithm. Liam overseeing a transfer of classified data. The senator's voice carried through the room like a blade. "Mr. Crow, please stay seated." Liam bolted. The room erupted. Security officers rushed forward. Cameras flashed frantically. Senators stood shouting orders, and Alexander. He sat very still. His body trembled not with panic, but with something else. Release. Maya leaned close, whispering in his ear. "They see you now. All of them." He closed his eyes just for a second, letting her words sink beneath his ribs where hope had been missing for far too long. When he opened them, the world no longer looked like a place determined to crush him. It looked like a place he might survive, because he was no longer walking through it alone. Chaos detonated inside the hearing chamber the moment Liam Crow lunged for the exit. Security surged toward him. Senators shouted over one another, and camera flashes strobed across the room in frantic bursts. The air vibrated with shock confusion, and the sudden crackle of truth ripping free from the lies that had suffocated the nation for weeks. But for Alexander Reeves, everything slowed. The noise muffled, the faces blurred. Only 2 things remained in sharp focus. Maya's hand, gripping the back of his chair, grounding him, and Liam Crow's expression when the evidence surfaced, one instant of pure exposed fear before he bolted. That single moment told Alexander everything he needed to know. He had been right. He had not imagined the danger. He had not lost his mind. The truth had always been there, waiting for the world to see it. But the world was about to see something far worse. As officers cornered Liam near the chamber doors, Jenna Park stepped forward, taking advantage of the commotion. Her voice rang through the room, sharp and unwavering. "I have additional files. These include full time-stamped footage of the Chicago blast loadout. Multiple angles. They contradict everything the company reported." Staffers rushed to transfer the data to the committee. Screens lit up with new images. Video 1 showed Liam authorizing access to a restricted server. Video 2 showed him entering a room marked "No personnel allowed" with a coded badge. Video 3 displayed audio logs, Liam's voice negotiating a private deal with a foreign buyer. Maya felt Alexander's breath stutter. This was the betrayal he had warned everyone about, and they had silenced him for it. The committee chair slammed the gavel. "Order! Order! This hearing will continue. Officers, detain Mr. Crow immediately." Liam made one desperate move, attempting to shove through a cluster of aides, but security closed in and forced him to the ground. Cameras pivoted, capturing every second for the nation to witness live. Maya whispered, "It is ending. He is caught." But Ethan's sudden sharp inhale from behind her made her turn. "Maya, look." She followed his gaze. Liam was not looking at the senators or the security officers pinning him. He was staring directly at Maya, not Alexander, not the evidence. "Maya!" His voice cut through the uproar like a blade. "If he goes down, you go with him." Maya's breath froze. Alexander jerked upright eyes, snapping to her. "What did he say?" Liam continued snarling as officers tried to haul him up. "You think you can hide behind him, nurse? You think the board will let you walk away after helping him run? You think a hand clamped over his mouth, but it was too late." The threat had already lodged itself like a shard of glass. The cameras caught it. The microphones caught it. The world saw it. Maya felt her stomach twist, but she did not step back. She stared straight at Liam with steady, unshaken eyes, silently defying him. Ethan hissed under his breath. "That man is psychotic," Maya whispered. "He is desperate, and desperate men break faster." Alexander stood slowly, hands trembling but body rigid with instinct. Protective instinct. Something ancient and fierce. He could tolerate being hunted. He could tolerate being betrayed. But hearing Liam threaten her snapped something inside him that had stayed dormant through fear, panic, trauma, and humiliation. Now it woke. The officers dragged Liam toward the hallway. Reporters swarmed microphones thrust forward, creating a wall of noise. One slipped through the crowd, shouting to Maya directly. "Miss, did you accompany Mr. Reeves during his disappearance? Did you help him evade authorities?" Maya stiffened, but before she could answer, Alexander stepped between them, shielding her with his entire frame. Enough. His voice thundered across the hall, surprising even himself. "You will not approach her. She is not a suspect. She is the person who saved my life." Cameras stopped. Reporters froze. The entire hallway shifted its focus onto the billionaire who had been painted as unstable, broken, paranoid. Yet, here he stood, steady, commanding, protective in a way that carried conviction, not fragility. Maya's breath caught because she recognized something in his shoulders and jaw. He was standing like a man who finally remembered the strength he once had and was no longer willing to hide it. Security escorted Liam down the hall, but the danger had not passed. Another wave of reporters charged forward with more questions. "Mr. Reeves, are you experiencing delusions? Mr. Reeves, who is this woman to you? Mr. Reeves, do you confirm a personal relationship?" Alexander's chest tightened again, but Maya stepped up beside him, placing her hand lightly at the center of his back. It was the same gesture she had used in the panic room, the same one that had anchored him then. It worked now too. He inhaled deeply and addressed the reporters. "I will answer only one question." The hallway fell silent. Alexander continued, voice steady. "The woman behind me is Maya Hart. She is an ER nurse who saved my life when I was hunted by my own company. She is the reason I am standing here." The crowd erupted, renewed feverish interest in the intimacy of his tone. Maya felt warmth bloom up her neck. Ethan muttered, "Sir, you are trending. Like instantly trending." But before the journalist could press further, security formed a barrier escorting the trio toward a secure room. Inside, the door slammed shut, muffling the roar outside. Ethan exhaled loudly. Okay, that was insane. Maya leaned against the wall, catching her breath. She looked at Alexander. He was staring at the floor chest, rising and falling unevenly. "Are you okay?" she whispered. He shook his head slowly. "That was the hardest thing I have done in weeks." She stepped closer. "You did it anyway, because you needed to protect the truth, and protect me." He swallowed hard, eyes lifting to meet hers. "When Liam threatened you, something happened. Something I could not control." Maya understood. The instinct to protect does not come from logic. It comes from love. She did not say the last word out loud, but something in his expression suggested he heard it anyway. A knock sounded on the door. The committee chair entered. "Mr. Reeves, you are cleared. The committee believes your testimony, and with Ms. Park's evidence, Mr. Crow is being charged with national security violations." Relief washed over Alexander like a wave, but he could not fully feel it yet. Something inside him was still trembling. The chair added, "We will hold a press conference shortly. We want you present, if you are willing." Alexander hesitated. Maya touched his arm gently. "I will be right beside you." His decision formed instantly. "Then I will be there." The chair nodded and left. Ethan paced the small room, buzzing with adrenaline. "After today, your life is going to explode even more. Cameras everywhere. Interviews, endless questions." Alexander responded quietly. "Then I want to leave right after the press conference. Leave the spotlight, the city, everything." Ethan blinked. "Seriously?" "Yes, but only if Maya agrees." Maya's breath caught. Her voice came out soft. "Go where?" He stepped closer, away from the noise, somewhere quiet, somewhere I can breathe. He hesitated, then added with a raw truth he could no longer hide. "Somewhere you are." Her heart pounded. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, an officer signaled them to move. The press conference was ready. They filed out. The hallway was calmer now, security restored order, but the air still carried the electricity of a nation watching. Maya glanced sideways at him. "Ready?" "No," he said honestly, "but I am ready to not face it alone." She offered her hand discreetly. Despite the cameras, despite the world watching, he took it. Their fingers intertwined. It was not dramatic, not public, not performative. It was something else. A silent promise. When they stepped toward the podium, the lights brightened, the microphones activated, and thousands waited to hear the truth from the man who had been buried beneath lies. Maya stood behind him. Ethan stood beside her. Alexander spoke. Calm, clear, whole. And for the first time in weeks, the world listened. The press conference ended in a blur of lights, voices, and 1,000 questions thrown into the air like sparks from a burning match. Reporters clamored for more details about the scandal. Analysts dissected every angle on live broadcasts, and the entire country watched as a billionaire once believed to be a criminal stood vindicated before them. But when the final statement was made, when Jenna Park handed the authenticated evidence to federal agents, when Liam Crow was escorted away in handcuffs, when the cameras finally lowered, Alexander Reeves felt something he had not felt in years. Silence. Not the suffocating silence of fear, but a fragile quiet that felt like the beginning of something new. He stepped away from the podium, body heavy with exhaustion, adrenaline dissipating like fading static. Maya was already there waiting for him. She did not smile. She did not congratulate him. She simply touched his arm with the same gentleness she had used since the night they first collided in Central Park. "You did it." Her voice was soft enough to barely reach him above the murmuring crowd. His throat tightened. "I did not do it alone." Ethan joined them, his voice buzzing with disbelief. "Dude, that was insane. You went full moral warrior out there." Alexander let out a quiet breath that might have been a laugh, or might have been relief cracking through his ribs. But Maya noticed what he could not hide, the tremor returning to his hands. She stepped closer. "Let's get you somewhere calm, away from all of this." Away turned out to be a small private room in a secure wing of the federal building, a place normally used for protected witnesses or high-ranking officials in need of respite. It was quiet, dimly lit, and mercifully empty. When the door closed behind them, an almost sacred stillness filled the space. Alexander sank into a chair, elbows on his knees, head bowed. Without thinking, Maya knelt in front of him, her hands gently wrapping around his. The gesture startled him, almost breaking him open again. He whispered hoarsely, "I thought I would fall apart on that stage, but you didn't." Her thumbs brushed soothing circles against the back of his hands. "You stood there and chose truth even when your voice shook. That is strength, Alexander. Not whatever the world calls power." He looked at her eyes, dark with exhaustion and something deeper, something fragile, something blooming quietly in the spaces trauma had hollowed out. "I keep waiting for the breaking point. The moment everything collapses again." Maya shook her head slowly. "Healing is not linear. You will still tremble, you will still panic, but you are not walking through it alone anymore." He drew in a shaky breath. "When Liam threatened you, something inside me snapped. I could not let anything happen to you." Her heartbeat kicked hard against her ribs. "You protected me because you are human, not because you owe me anything." He stared at her with an intensity that made the room feel warmer. "But I do owe you. More than I can ever repay." She placed a hand lightly on his cheek. The skin beneath her palm felt warm, alive, vulnerable. "You don't owe me anything for being human either." Something moved in his expression, a quiet surrender, a letting go, a becoming. She withdrew her hand slowly and stood. "You need rest. Real rest. Not the collapse kind. The intentional kind." He nodded, but he did not move. His body remained heavy, grounding him to the chair as if fear of the world outside still hovered just beyond the door. She understood. Trauma rarely disappeared simply because the truth finally won. Ethan excused himself to give them space, promising to check on transportation soon. The room grew even quieter. Maya pulled a blanket from a shelf and placed it over Alexander's shoulders. Instead of thanking her, he looked up with a weary half-smile. "Will you sit with me?" She did, in the chair beside him, close enough that their knees brushed lightly each time one of them shifted. For several minutes they said nothing. The silence was full, but gentle. Eventually he spoke. "I am stepping down. From the company." Maya turned to him. "Are you sure?" "Yes. The board will demand it anyway, and I cannot return to a place built on pressure and expectation that suffocated me. A place where no one saw me unless I was producing results." She watched him with quiet understanding. "What will you do instead?" His eyes drifted toward the small window where only a sliver of sky could be seen. "I want to help people who live with what I do. Panic, trauma, the feeling of being hunted by your own past. A foundation, maybe. Something real. Something meaningful." Maya's breath softened. "That sounds like healing." He shifted his gaze back to her. "And what about you? What do you want?" She blinked, surprised by the question. "I want—" Her voice faltered. He waited patiently for her to continue. "I want to be where I am needed, where I matter, where I can help someone breathe again." He let out a breath that nearly trembled. "You already do, for me." Their eyes locked. The air thickened with quiet intimacy neither dared name yet. He spoke again, voice lower. "When you touched me earlier during the panic episode, I could feel the world returning piece by piece. That has never happened before." Maya felt her throat tighten. "That's because you finally let someone anchor you." His gaze softened. "Then let me say this clearly. I do not want a life without you in it." Silence. Heavy, warm, real. She felt her heart expand painfully. "Alexander." He smiled faintly. "I am not asking for answers right now. I just need you to know. For once in my life, I want something that has nothing to do with power or control or responsibility. I want something simple, something human. You." Her breath caught. She reached for his hand. Their fingers intertwined naturally as if they had always known each other. Ethan returned moments later, interrupting the fragile moment. "Hey, I found us a quiet Airbnb outside the city. No neighbors, no media, no drones." Alexander stood slowly, steadiness returning to his posture. "Good, let us go." But before they left the room, Alexander turned to Maya one last time, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for seeing me." She touched his chest lightly over the spot where his heartbeat thrummed beneath her fingertips. "I always will." The ride to the Airbnb was quiet. No news, no chatter, just three people in a borrowed car driving toward the first breath of peace after a storm that nearly destroyed a life. When they arrived, the house was small, surrounded by trees lit with the golden glow of dusk. It felt like stepping out of noise and into a new beginning. Inside the dim living room, Maya helped Alexander remove his jacket. He looked around the quiet space and exhaled a breath that felt like the first clean inhale he had taken in months. She stepped closer. "How do you feel?" He turned to her with a smile that was small but real. "For the first time, I think I am becoming myself again." And she knew without needing any more words that this was the moment his healing truly began. Not in the noise of a courtroom or the chaos of a scandal, but in the quiet, steady presence of the woman who had chosen to stay. The Airbnb sat tucked behind a line of tall maple trees whose branches swayed gently in the early evening breeze, their leaves casting soft, shifting shadows across the porch. Inside, warmth pooled in small corners, the dim, yellow lamp beside the couch, the faint scent of cedar from the wooden walls, the quiet hum of the old refrigerator in the kitchen. It felt like a sanctuary carved out of a world far too loud. Alexander stepped into the living room and let silence settle over him. It did not feel threatening anymore. For once, silence felt like permission to breathe, to slow down, to exist without fear pressing claws into his spine. He moved to the window. Beyond the trees, the sky glowed gold and amber as the sun dipped behind the distant horizon. He stood there for a long moment until Maya appeared beside him holding 2 steaming mugs of tea. Chamomile again. Gentle, soft, healing. She handed one to him, and for a second their fingers brushed. He did not pull away this time. His voice was quiet. "You have stayed with me in every moment where I was falling apart." Maya smiled softly. "You were not falling apart. You were finding your way back to yourself." He took a slow sip of tea. The warmth spread through his chest like steady sunlight. Ethan dropped his bag in the hallway and announced he was going to sleep for 20 hours straight. Maya laughed, a small sound light and human and grounding. Alexander watched her with an expression he could not disguise. Admiration. Gratitude. Something deeper he had not yet dared to name. When Ethan disappeared into the guest room and the door clicked shut, Maya turned to him. "You look like you are thinking about 1,000 things at once." He set the mug down on the windowsill. "I am thinking about the first night you found me in the park, how I was so sure the world was ending, how I believed I was losing my mind, and how you knelt beside me without hesitation." She moved closer. Anyone would have stopped. He shook his head. "No, not like you. You did not look at me like a headline or a threat or a collapsing empire. You looked at me like a person." Maya's breath softened. "Because that is what you are, a person. Not a machine, not a company, not an algorithm. A man who had been carrying too much alone." He stared at her. "You kept me alive?" Maya held his gaze unflinching. "You kept yourself alive. I just reminded you were worth saving." Something in him broke open gently, not like shattering glass, but like a locked door easing open for the first time in years. He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to step back, but she didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek, a feather-soft touch that sent warmth rushing through them both. "I never knew healing could look like this," he whispered. She placed her hand over his. "Healing is not a straight line. Sometimes it is 2 people choosing to face the darkness together." His breath trembled slightly. "And what if I want to keep choosing you?" Her eyes softened. "Then we figure out what that looks like. Together." He closed the small distance between them. Not fully, not in a dramatic sweeping motion. Just enough that their foreheads touched and the air between them became something sacred. He whispered, "You taught me how to breathe again. You taught me how to see again. You taught me how to be human again." She exhaled shakily, her voice faint. "And you taught me that presence can be love too." They stood like that for several minutes, foreheads touching, breaths mingling, the quiet of the room wrapping around them like a safety they had both needed for too long. When they finally separated, Maya guided him to the couch. They sat, close side by side, shoulders touching softly. No rush, no pressure, no expectations, just warmth, just closeness, just healing. Alexander looked around the small cabin again. "I think I want to stay here a while, away from the noise, away from the pressure." Maya nodded. "You can. The world can wait." His voice softened. "You will stay too, if you want." She leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. "I want to stay." His arm moved almost unconsciously to wrap around her, pulling her gently against him. She fit into the space beside him as if the universe had carved that place specifically for her. At some point, Maya's fingers intertwined with his. Their palms fit perfectly. A grounding, a promise. Outside, the wind carried the scent of autumn through the trees. Inside, two hearts began rewriting themselves quietly. In the days that followed, Alexander filed his official resignation from the company. He released a calm, steady statement thanking the employees, acknowledging the damage, and affirming his focus on healing and rebuilding his life. The media reacted as expected: shock, speculation, endless analysis. But he did not read any of it. Maya kept the news off the entire time. Instead, she taught him grounding techniques, cooked simple meals, coaxed him into laughing at Ethan's sarcastic jokes, and walked with him in the woods behind the cabin whenever the memories threatened to claw back into his mind. And each time panic flared, each time the world tried to tighten its grip on him again, Maya's hand found his and anchored him. Always steady, always soft, always there. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the whole world in amber, Alexander and Maya sat on the small wooden bench behind the cabin. The leaves rustled softly overhead. His voice was barely a breath. "Maya." "Yes." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "I have been working on something." She opened it gently. It was a proposal, simple, quiet, heartfelt, for a foundation dedicated to helping first responders, veterans, and civilians suffering from PTSD. Her eyes softened. "This is beautiful." He looked at her. "You inspired this." She placed a hand over his. "Then, let's build it together." Alexander inhaled deeply, the cool air steadying him. "You saved me." She shook her head. "No, you saved yourself. I just walked with you while you did it," and stared at her, his voice raw and full of truth. "Then walk with me for a long time." She did not hesitate, always. As the last light of day filtered through the trees, he leaned gently against her, and she leaned into him, both finding the quiet kind of love that did not need grand declarations or dramatic endings. Just presence. Just healing. Just two souls choosing each other in the simplest, purest way. For the first time in his life, Alexander Reeves was not the man the world feared. He was simply a man who had survived, who had healed, who had found love in the place he least expected. And for the first time in hers, Maya Hart knew without doubt that love did not always begin with fireworks. Sometimes it began on a cold night with a trembling whisper in a dark park. And sometimes, if you were brave enough to stay, it became something strong enough to save two lives at once. If you are still here with me listening to Alexander and Maya's journey unfold piece by piece, then maybe you felt something in their story that tugged at your own heart. Maybe you recognize the quiet battles no one sees. Maybe you recognize the strength it takes to stand back up after the world has tried to bury you. Or maybe you simply believe, like Maya did, that no one deserves to face the darkness alone. Their story is not about billionaire power or dramatic twists. even though those moments shaped their fate. At its core, this story is about healing, about choosing to stay when someone is trembling, about seeing the human behind the headlines, about discovering that love is not lightning or fireworks, but the steady presence of someone who whispers, "You are safe. I am right here." So now it is your turn. Tell me something. Do you believe that a single moment of kindness from a stranger can change the entire direction of a life? Have you ever been the person who needed someone to kneel beside you and remind you to breathe again? Or have you ever been the one who stayed when it would have been easier to walk away? I want to hear your truth. Tell me where you are watching from, your city, your country, your tiny corner of the world. Tell me if this story found you on a quiet night or a loud afternoon. Tell me if you felt that moment when Alexander finally let himself be seen, or the moment Maya realized she was no longer just helping him heal, she was healing too. And if any part of their journey touched you, if you want more stories like this, stories of fragile beginnings, slow healing, emotional undulation, and love that does not try to fix but simply holds, then take 1 second right now to tap. Tap, subscribe, and tap the little bell. It helps this small channel grow, and it tells me you want more stories where broken hearts are not judged, where trauma is not a weakness, and where love arrives quietly when it is needed most. And because this channel is not just about stories, but about connection, here is my question for you. The one I ask at the end of every tale: if you met someone on their darkest night, shaking afraid, convinced they were unworthy, would you stay like Maya did, or walk away like so many others? Type your answer in the comments. Stay or walk. Let us see how many hearts in this community still choose compassion in a world that often forgets it. And finally, if you want to support this story, share it with one friend, just one, who might need a reminder that healing is possible, that they are not broken beyond repair, and that sometimes the right person arrives exactly when the world feels heaviest. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And wherever you are watching from tonight, I hope you feel a little less alone.